time of filming this video, it is currently the last day of May, so I figured it would be a really good time to film a reading wrap-up video, right? Tell you a little bit about the books I've been reading this month. So, I'm getting prepared, I do my makeup, I set my camera up, I go to gather all the books I've read, and I realise I have literally none of them here to show you. So I'm sorry guys. The books that I read were either ebooks or library books, which have now gone back. One of them was an audiobook, but I've already spoken about that on my channel, so I'm not going into too much detail. So yeah, I have nothing physical to show you, so that feels a bit silly. But silliness aside, let's get into the books. One of the first books that I actually finished this month was Amy Schumer's The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo. I guess you could say read this as an audiobook, or listen to this as an listen to this as an audiobook, that's what I did. I do have another video on this and why I hated it so much, because it was really terrible, but I will link that video down in the description below, and potentially somewhere around me on the screen right now. It could be anywhere. But just click that, give that a listen, and let me know what you think. Next up, I went from a book that I absolutely hated to a book that I absolutely loved. This book is a graphic novel and it's Batman the Killing Joke, which is said to be one of the kind of like darkest Batman story arcs out there. It's the one where Joker goes further than he's probably gone before. We do get a Joker origin story, which is pretty cool. Honestly, I kind of knew about the plot of this before I started reading it, but it still really shocked me, and it still made me like really emotional. It was a tough one to get through. Absolutely brilliant. The artwork was fantastic, the storyline was fantastic, the writing was fantastic, but it was definitely a pretty emotional book. I don't want to give away too many spoilers if you don't know anything about it, but I will say if you have any interest in Batman or just DC in general, or you just like graphic novels, definitely give it a read. Next up, I read Splinter the Silence by Val McDermid. I have mixed feelings when it comes to Val McDermid. The first book of hers I read was a fiction one, and it was a standalone one. I can't even remember the name of it now, but I really didn't like it. I was really disappointed by it. But then I read her non-fiction book Forensics and absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. So I decided to give her fiction another try, and I've read a couple of her books and enjoyed them a lot since then. This book was part of a series that she does surrounding Carol Jordan and I think Tony Hill. It's two characters, and I didn't realise when I picked this up from the library, but this was actually like the 9th book in the series, so I was kind of coming into this with like no idea of any of the background, which is never really a good idea, and I don't normally like to do that, but I had the book and I thought the story sounded really good, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go anyway. And I did really enjoy it. Even with not knowing the background of the characters, she did a really good job of telling you enough about their backstory that you felt like you knew them and understood them, and nothing was kind of confusing or weird. The plot itself was about a man who was essentially targeting women who, you know, they're pretty much like social justice warrior types, and they're being trolled a lot on the internet and getting a lot of abuse. And he targets them and kills them, but makes it look like they've committed suicide. So it was quite an interesting story in that respect, and I did really enjoy it. I thought it was really good. I mean, I wouldn't say it's up there as like the best book I've ever read, but it was definitely a good sort of like solid 4 out of 5 kind of thing. And I don't know about the earlier books in the series, but based on this one alone, I definitely recommend it. And I think I'm probably going to go back and give the others a read now as well. Next up was a book that's a little bit different and is written for a slightly younger audience, but I still found it really enjoyable. And that is Marvel by Brian Selznick. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Basically, it's this huge book, but half of it tells a story through kind of like pictures and drawings and artwork, and then the other half is like written in prose. And it's a really good story. So it tells the story of this family with the surname Marvel, and kind of like their tale of living, well, surviving shipwreck and then living kind of in a theatre and being actors and things like that, and their story of these like 5 generations. And then the second part tells a kind of like seemingly unrelated story of a boy who runs away from boarding school to kind of like go find his uncle in London, I think. And they're kind of like seemingly unrelated at first, and then they start intertwining more, and then there's quite a big twist. But I just thought it was a very good book, very cleverly written. I loved the presentation, I loved the art style in it, I thought it was really great. It was just a very fun little book with quite a sort of nice and slightly deep message hidden in there, which I thought was quite nice. And speaking of reading kids' books, I ventured into more kind of kids' young adult fiction this month, which isn't something I normally do, but I don't know why I did this month. I just fancy something a bit different, something quite light. And I read the first 2 books in the Percy Jackson series. Now, I'd heard a lot of really good things about this, but honestly, I knew nothing of the plot or the story or anything. Turns out the Percy Jackson books are about this boy who kind of like notices this weird stuff happening around him but doesn't really think much of it. Turns out he is the son of one of the kind of like big Greek gods, Poseidon. And he discovers he's like half-blood, so half god, half human, and he's got all these amazing kind of like powers and stuff like that, and he's sent to this camp with other kids just like him, and he goes on all these adventures. There's a lot of magic, there's a lot of really cool references to Greek mythology and stuff like that. There were a couple of like weird little points in the first book that sort of annoyed me a bit. So one of the characters from kind of Greek mythology is sent to like watch over him and kind of check on him while he's away at this boarding school, and they pose as one of his teachers. And in doing that, they try and teach him about like Greek mythology, kind of like as a sort of history lesson to his background without him realising. But the weird thing is, they do this in a Latin class, and like, surely if you're learning Latin, you're going to be learning about Roman mythology, not Greek mythology like everything in this book is based on. And it was, I don't know, there were just really weird little things like that that didn't really make sense to me. But I don't know, maybe I just don't know enough about that kind of thing to understand. Like I'm actually kind of like quite into the whole sort of like mythology side of things, like with Greek and Roman mythology. I think it's really cool, and I think there's some really cool stories there. There's a lot of kind of like dark and messed up stuff, kind of like fairy tales I guess, which is maybe why I like it. But I'm no expert or anything, so maybe I'm missing something there, but that just struck me as a little bit odd. Other than that, they're really fun books. They're really sort of like light, easy reading, lots of like magic and adventures and really fun likeable characters. I do like all the references to Greek mythology. I think they kind of brought in certain aspects really well, and I did really enjoy it. And taking those kind of like traditional myths and stories and things and putting them in a modern setting was really, really cool, so I enjoyed that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It was quite a sort of short month for me in terms of the amount of books that I read. I just kind of took things easy and just read some kind of like nice, fun, relaxed books, not anything too heavy or difficult, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good month with the exception of Amy Schumer. But let's not talk about her. Anyway, they're the books that I read. Let me know what you thought of them, if you've read any of them down in the comments, or if you now fancy giving any of them a read. If you have any recommendations for me, based on what I've been talking about, please let me know them as well, because I love to get book recommendations from everyone, like literally everyone, it's great. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again soon.